Right, good day, hi, and welcome. Sorry, my camera cut off. I don't know where it cut off. Probably halfway through a rant. But anyway, I want to give you guys, okay, as I was ranting about the Avro aerosol, I'll see what I missed on the video. But I really like getting into depth on these topics because it really does show you like the complexity of, okay, to me nothing is complicated. It's just you need to have the information, right? And there's a lot that, us civilians are never going to be privy to. So maybe the F-35 is as good as advertised 100%. But I've yet to see any jet in history as good as advertised. And with the exception of probably the A-10. You know what I mean? And the A-10 is just because it was a low-flying bar of it has to be flying tank, it has to kill things, it has to be easy to maintain, take off just about anywhere. You have to be able to take a lot of shit kicking while you're blowing shit up. That's it. Easy to maintain and cheap. $1,000,000. Yeah. A-10s, $1,000,000. Yeah, $1,000,000 an aircraft. And the most effective attack aircraft ever built, right? Probably next to the P-47. And even then, I'd probably put my money on the A-10. In third spot is probably the Frogfoot. But completely vulnerable to air defenses. And I've seen A-10s fly and stuff like that. So, in air shows and stuff. I've seen a lot of wonderful aircraft. I haven't seen an F-22 yet. I haven't seen the Su-57. Never seen a MiG-29 in the flesh, so to speak, or in the metal. But I've seen just about everything else, right? Sat in lots, worked in the National Aviation Museum. And I want just to give you guys an idea, okay, what I was talking about, I don't know where it cut off, but about weapons industry in Canada where, like, what the death of the Avro Arrow, why that's why I bring it up and so many Canadians bring this up is what it represented when we killed it. So you have to understand, like, Carney not wanting to go with mixed fleets. Well, back in the Cold War, okay, we had the CF-100, which was the most technologically advanced all-weather fighter interceptor of its time, but it was a straight-wing fighter, so it was fine catching the Tupolev Bears and stuff like that. But then the Russians come out with the Badger, and then they go really batshit crazy and say, let's make Tu-22. It'll go 1,000 miles per hour across Arctic. And we're like, fuck, we need a new airplane. You know what I mean? So, yeah, we can't catch them anymore, right? So the RCAF makes a proposal, Avro Canada or Avro Canada, everybody calls it Avro. The Brits, which was a British company that was open in Canada, and they said, yeah, go ahead. Brits like, well, what can the Canadians really design as an interceptor? Well, Canadians like, well, yeah, so like, go ahead, it'll be your aircraft, your design, we don't care. So Avro Canada decides to build like the first attempt at a super fighter in Canada, and it's a Gen 3 aircraft, okay? So the Gen 3, Gen 4 kind of what makes a Gen 3, what makes a Gen 4 versus, okay, like if we were to go back to, say, the Volksjager 162 Salamander by the Nazis, okay, and the Me-262, which more people probably know. These are like the first real in operation jets. And the Me-262 is the first operational jet, right? Not the first jet design. The Soviets, they go back to the Yak-9 or MiG-9 or something like that. And that's their first. The Swedes, they had one, the Panther, I believe, was the, it was the X-47 was the first U.S. jet. But I think the first one in service was the Panther or the Banshee. I can't remember. It was one or the other. And stuff like that, or the P-80 Shooting Star. It was something along those lines, right? But we'll start, say, the Gen 1 really begins Nazi Germany. Gen 2 is like F-86 Sabre, MiG-15. That's like Gen 2, up to the MiG, say, 19. Then Gen 3 is like MiG-21, stuff like that. The Thunder Chief, the Vought Corsairs. These are like Gen 3. Gen 4, F4 Phantom is like the end of the Gen 3. Borderline Gen 4, right? The CF100 or 101 Voodoo would be a Gen 3, which is the CF, the Voodoo. The Americans had it, we had it. They were like a Gen 3 aircraft, okay? But the Voodoo was not the Avro Aero, So the Avro Aero comes in, and we're going to compare just performance and stuff, just so you get an idea of what we would be getting for our money, or what we would be losing for our money, what we have lost. Okay, like what does Avro Aero Gen 5 look like? Well, okay, let's start with the Avro Aero and the F35 and the Gripen. Okay, so the Gripen does Mach 2, the Avro Aero does Mach 2, Okay, the F35 is a little slower at Mach 1.6. Okay, the cruise speed on all three aircraft are almost similar, believe it or not, because even though the Saab Gripen doesn't super cruise, it is a very efficient little aircraft for its size and aerodynamics and stuff like that. So it's fairly fast. But the Avro Aero cruised at like 600 plus miles per hour. That was the cruise speed, right? Which is faster than faster than the Hornet. It's probably around the same speed that the F-35. The F-35 might be slightly faster in cruise, but they're all comparable. So that's kind of impressive. This is 1959 technology, okay? Against, technically, if you want to argue the F-35 is the best airplane in the world, fighter aircraft ever been, Avro Aero either cruises slightly faster or around the same speed, okay? So that's pretty good. Range. Well, the Avro Aero has a bunch of different ranges. It has, in just like patrol mode, probably a 12 to 1600 mile range, depending on the variant, on internal fuel, on about 2,900 gallons of fuel, though, but whatever, because it was designed as an Arctic patrol aircraft, right, to shoot down bombers. Neither the F-35 or the Saab Gripen has these ranges, but you're looking at like a 400 to 600 mile range on the Saab Gripen, and maybe a 600 to 800 mile range on the F-35. There's all kinds of different numbers out there, but you're almost double the range on the Avro Aero, except for in intercept mode, it's about 300 miles, just because you have so much fuel. But you're talking 300 miles at Mach 2, okay, you're going to be at full afterburn for a good while, whereas you got maybe 6 minutes of fuel on the other two aircraft at full afterburn, right? 6 to maybe 12 minutes. So Avro Aero kind of takes this. Okay, the 1959 technology. Okay, this is what we gave up in favor of the American, giving them our markets, buying their equipment instead of developing our own. The Avro Aero, we're going to compare it to bring in a few other aircraft of the hottest super fighters of the day here. So the fastest aircraft in service right now is the MiG-31 at Mach 3.2. It is god-awful fast, and probably the fastest climbing because it is designed as a sole interceptor, okay, and strike fighter, escort, that kind of stuff, right? Not really. It is reconnaissance, but it's not reconnaissance. It really does have a, long range, ridiculous long range, and air-to-air refueling. That's the other thing that Avro Aero didn't have air-to-air refueling like the Gripen and the F-35 has. So you got to factor that in. So the Avro Aero, okay, is faster than the F-35. The F-35 can do Mach 1.6. But the Avro Aero could do Mach 1.5 at 50,000 feet in a 3.5 G turn, which a lot of fighters nowadays can't do that. But remember, this is a delta wing aircraft designed for high speed at high altitudes. The other thing is, okay, the top dog for altitude performance is going to be the MiG-25 and the MiG-31 because they're meant to be up really high, not to do swirling dogfights, right? These are very large aircraft. They're nearly 100 feet long. And what happens is they get up to 80,000 to 123,000 feet surface ceiling with a full combat load. That's what they're doing. Right behind that's going to be something like, say, Eurofighter, F-22, Su-35, Su-37, or Su-57, those kind of Su-30. What else would be able to do it? F-15. Whatever F-14s would still be, Iranian ones, that would still be. They can reach about 60,000 feet, which is very impressive. The F-35, I don't know if it can make it to 60,000 feet. I think it's more like 55, 56,000 like the F-18s and the F-6. It just doesn't have the wing area, you know what I mean? And the Saab Gripen is probably not quite as high as that. It's probably around the 50 to 55,000 foot ceiling is, I think, what they, whatever. But most aircraft don't do dogfights and stuff over 28,000 feet. The air's just too thin. It's really hard. But the Avro Arrow, it can do that. It flies up to like 68, 69,000 feet, right? That's what it could do. It was almost, it's up into MiG-31, MiG-25, MiG-31 territory and above F-22 territory. That's pretty impressive. Pretty impressive. We're talking combat loads. Climb rates. Okay, F-18 about 2 miles a minute. I don't know if that's with a full combat load or not. Probably not. Saab Gripen, somewhere around the 2 to 3 mile per minute, depending on what the combat load is. The F-35, I've heard a few between 4 and 5 miles per minute, which is very impressive. Very, very impressive. With a full combat load, it's probably, again, it's always lower. Whatever, F-15, 10 miles a minute, easy. Su-27, Su-30, 8 to 10 miles per minute. The Su-27, 10 miles per minute all day. F-4 Phantom, just for reference, 8 miles per minute. This is without combat load, though. Eurofighter, I think 11 miles per minute. A very impressive aircraft. So it's in F-22 territory. F-22 might be around that as well. But, those are the super fighters. Those are the big dogs. MiG-25 and MiG-31 probably climb, 10 miles per minute plus. These are very heavy aircraft, but they're extremely powerful, right? Everything else falls from there. So where does the Avro Arrow go in? Well, with a full combat load, 5 miles a minute. So it's probably about 8 miles per minute, like the 7 to 8 miles per minute, like the F-4 Phantom, without a combat load. So up to 68,000, 69,000 feet. That's 1959 technology, right? Okay, so I'm not going to bother getting into the radar stuff, but just in passing and mention, okay, so we've got an aircraft that can go at least double the range of our current F-18s on internal fuel with no external fuel, which could be solved in Avro Arrow 2.0 air-to-air refueling. It goes just as fast at Mach 2, and if a little bit of the Avro Arrow 2.6 might have even been capable of going faster, but we never got a chance to test it beyond Mach 2. But the airframe was designed for Mach 2.5. An Avro Arrow Mark III would be a Mach 3 plus aircraft. So we would have, by now, easily had Avro Arrow Mark III, which would be a Mach 3, Mach 3.2 aircraft, same as the MiG-31, climbing 8 miles per minute with a full combat load of about 2 tons, or that of a B-25 Mitchell, to 68 to 70,000 feet. Intercept range was about 300 miles, so that's in full afterburner. And patrol was about 1,200 to 1,600 mile range. Almost 2 to 3 times that of the CF-18 and Saab Gripens, and similar to, say, an F-14, F-15, F-4 Phantom. And then had we had adapted fuel tanks to that, Probably could have got a good 2,500 mile range, 2,000 to 2,500 mile range on this thing. So that's what the technology we were capable of building, and it had at the time, even though it wasn't the first, it gets recognized as the first first primitive Gen 3 fly-by-wire aircraft in service. Was the Avro Arrow. So it was a very innovative aircraft for its type and time. I'm not sure what the maintenance was on the Avro. I'm sure it was pretty high, but they could swap out engines in a half an hour, which would alleviate maintenance by take the engines out, put new ones in. So each aircraft will probably have to have about 4 engines, so that you could fly it. By the time you got the first batch of engines fixed and ready to go, you were working on the second one, and you had fresh engines and up you could go again to do that. But it also, one of the things that it was all weather, the aircraft had another ability that was other aircraft at the time didn't have. And again, this is what comes in with the Gen 3 aircraft, and that was the ability to track about 12 targets and shoot them down 8 targets at a time. All 8 missiles, right? Falcon missiles, okay? Which the impressive part is not that. Any fighter can do that nowadays. But the impressive part was the fact that it could do it without the assist of ground radar guiding the missile. Hence why, the CF-100 used cannons and rockets to take down, bomber was going to use that because it was more analog, because it could carry missiles, but the missiles had to be guided from the ground, right? So, yeah, or help to guide from the ground, right? So that's what we lost, okay, on our second attempt at a fighter and our first attempt at a super fighter. That fit every need at the time that the RCAF needed. And we replaced it with airplanes that cost us just as much or more than what it would have cost to finish the program, and that was the CF-101 Voodoo, which we flew almost 700 of those, alongside about almost 700 CF-100s up until the 1980s, until we replaced I think it was in 1984 when we got the CF-18, right? And we got rid of 1,400 aircraft. Not overnight, but we phased them out because, trying to keep 2 fleets going, or 3 fleets going. And then we had 350 starfighters on top of that, and another 70 or so F5 freedom fighters, known as the Canadair F116, which I got to see fly at the air show. They used to use it as a demonstrator. The airplane, the F5 has always been so dear to my heart because, yes, I've sat in them and stuff like that, and the ones at the museum, I'd get into that one every now and then. But what really got me with that aircraft was just how wonderful of a flying machine it really was to watch. It was just ballet in the sky. And watching the prototype CF-116 flying around at 50 feet above the ground, just doing little pirouettes all over the place, that was one of the most memorable air show displays I've ever saw. Not the most impressive aircraft for other things, but just it's there. Okay, now it's there. Oh, it's there. I love the F5. I love the F5. It just didn't turn out to be the best. It was it was called a day fighter interceptor. It just wasn't a great multi-role aircraft, but the platform was really good because it was low maintenance, easy to maintain. And it was 1,000 mile per hour aircraft, not quite Mach 2, but it was a good airplane for what it was. It's just it got a bad rap for not being technologically advanced enough at the time. But we did have I think we had 70 or 80 of those all at the same time, right? So we replaced it with 140 aircraft, and somehow the liberals and the conservatives never made the pitch. Look, during the Cold War, we had at least at any one time, right after World War II, we had thousands of tanks. But when we got the Centurion tanks, for example, we had at least 500 of those or more. I can't remember what the number was. You can go look back at it. And we had about 500 Leopard 1s at the time. And most of them were stationed in Europe, but we had a sizable tank force. We had a huge air force because some of the missions that we were going to do, right, were nuclear. This is something the Avro Arrow was being designed for, was nuclear weapons delivery. So, okay, it was primarily designed as an interceptor, and it would have excelled at that. It wouldn't have been an Avro Arrow against the MiG-21. I would put in a dogfight. I would put my money on the MiG-21 because better visibility. I've sat in the nose of the Avro Arrow. I'm one of very few men that have ever done this. The one that's left on display at the Aviation Museum. I'm sure other people have jumped into the cockpit since then. But you're talking about maybe a few hundred people on the planet that have ever sat in that nose, right? I'm one of them, because I worked there. It was great. And I did close the clamshell of the Avro Arrow, and it was a Buck Rogers airplane, as they say. It was just, the view was so weird. You can see here and here and here, but you could barely see ahead of you until, there was, the stick was still in there, but everything else, the ejection seat, the dash was all ripped out. They've since sort of restored it for display. To how much accuracy, I don't know, but you can now go see the Avro Arrow cockpit opened up, and you can look in and you can see, what it was like. But what I learned from that airplane, that it was an interceptor. It was meant to shoot down bombers, because that's what it wouldn't have come up against fighter escort, because it didn't exist at the time. Like a MiG-21 couldn't make it over the Arctic like that. It had crashed in the ocean long before it could, get far enough away from Russia. Where the Avro Arrow could go into Russian airspace, take out the bombers, but the idea was to take them out before that. But the point I'm getting is that we had mixed fleets that replaced the Avro Arrow. We only built 6 of them, right? But we replaced them with almost 700 Voodoos. And those Voodoos covered the range of the entire country. Now, the thing is those Voodoos are no longer around. They got replaced. A lot of them went to Belgium. I wouldn't know how many would be even sitting in mothballs. A lot of them get cut up, and that's what happens to a lot of fighters. It happened to the CF-100s, F-86s. They just cut them up and scrap them, right? What they do with the actual scrap, I don't know. Some military stuff, you can't scrap it because it's composite materials. You can't melt them down. There's all kinds of problems there. Some of it you can resurface. Aluminum you can always melt down and build other things. But the point I'm making is that we had the Voodoo, which was a good airplane for Canada, okay? We didn't get the training, but we had the coverage, right? The Starfighter, the idea with it was to fly into Russian territory with an Air Genie nuke in your belly, drop it on, whether you got it from the Canadian Arctic or from Eastern Europe. Us Canadians, we were going to fly, we built some of these ourselves, under contract, and we were going to fly them into Russian territory. And the doctrine in Eastern Europe was that the Starfighter a Canadian pilot would fly. It's like, okay, buddy, here's what you're going to do. When the war kicks off, what we're going to do is, bring a sandwich or something with you, because you might get a little bit hungry, you don't want to be starving. Maybe a nice picture of your family. Because what you're going to do is you're going to fly over, you're going to drop the Air Genie, you're going to say sorry, but we dropped the nuke on your air base, but you're not going to have enough fuel to come back, so what you're going to do is just keep flying north, ditch the airplane, okay, and then when the war's over, we're going to come and we're going to pick you up, So you're going to have to maybe bring a jackknife with you or something, maybe a lighter or some matches there, because you might be in the Russian tundra for a little bit there, so until we can get you, Yeah, that's what they were going to do. That's what they were prepared to do. But the point is that it was a mixed fleet. A Starfighter for every 1 hour flown was about 15 hours of routine maintenance. The F-18 was about 12 for every routine hour flown on average. So going from the CF-18 to the F-35 is an increase of maintenance by about double. Going from the F-18 to the Saab Gripen is about less than half. It's like maybe 2 to 4 hours of maintenance like an F-16. So these are things to consider, but can we get away with a mixed fleet for a short amount of time? So what the military guys are saying is that if Canada had to operate the outgoing F-18s, which are getting one more upgrade before their replacement, but we've been saying that now for how long? yeah, no, the F-18s we're going to scrap them, and it was just like we never get around to it. We bought some more stopgap ones from Australia, but we bought their old, worn out airplanes that were the same as ours, and everybody thinks we're getting new airplanes, but it's not. They're the same. But the CF-18 is going to run into a problem that the old MiG-29s and stuff like that ran into, where they're still relevant enough to be upgraded, but they're just getting worn out. They're just getting absolutely worn out. And what's important here is that, like this stopgap, we have to phase in a new aircraft over time. But it doesn't mean we just get rid of the F-18s on day one. What we have to do, because why not? Well, this is the problem the Ukraine has. Okay, yeah, you have all MiG-29s? Okay, yeah, well, here, you're going to get F-16s now. Great. Who maintains them? How long does it take to train up an F-16 F-16 pilot? A couple of years, right? At least 2 years. If you go by the Israeli standard, it's 5 years to bring a pilot up to scratch. Okay, that's problem number one. What's problem number two? Well, problem number two is who keeps the airplanes flying? Parts. You got to set up a parts. How do you get a parts supply chain going during a war? You know what I mean? Not easy to do. So this takes time. You have to basically wean out the other aircraft. So what the Canadian military is saying is that, well, we won't be able to run 3 fleets, F-35 and Saab Gripen and the remaining F-18s, which I don't believe that they can't. But I just think there will be growing pains of doing it. And of course, because everything's so political, it'll be like, oh, it's a disaster, a failure. It's like, no, it's the same thing we did with the CF-100s and the Starfighters, the Voodoos, to transition to the F-18s, right? But the only difference was, unlike the Voodoos and the CF-100s, which we kept the CF-100s around for a long time, up until like 1986 or something like that, until we had the F-18s up and working and flying and doing this thing. It's like, okay, we can now phase out those aircraft, but we're going to keep the Voodoos for a little while longer. We'll sell some of them, but we're going to keep a backbone there so we have a sizable air force. But then something came along, such as liberals, and said, well, we just, everybody loves Canada and we're not at war with anybody. So look, the way liberals think typically is, if your house isn't burning down, disband the fire department because it's a waste of money. It's never going to happen. We don't need it, right? That's how liberals typically think. The conservatives like, everybody's trying to kill us and we need 80,000 fighters. You know what I mean? So it's somewhere, you got to kind of find the middle. I know I'm exaggerating on both sides here, but you got to find the middle ground where it's like, okay, Canada is just whether you realize this or not, it is the second largest country on the planet, landmass wise. You can't just say, well, because we're only 40 million people plus illegals, that, because we're a small country, it's too expensive for us, therefore, whatever. Look, Sweden is 10 million people and they have more fighters than we do. You know what I mean? Why? Because they understand the giant beast that's across the Baltics from them can crush them, right? Well, here's a news flash for Canada. Okay, if Sweden has to deal with Russia, right? Well, Canada, if you understand why we had so many fighters in the Cold War in the first place, well, number one, we were in the nuclear age. But what was the other problem? Well, the bombers we knew were coming over the North Pole. Full stop. Where were they headed? Washington. What's in between Washington or the United States and Russia? Canada. Where's the battlefield going to be? So the Americans are like, we're going to use our Beaumark missiles and our interceptors, and if it's a nuclear bomb, we're sorry, but we're going to shoot it down over your territory. And we're like, well, maybe that's not such a great idea. How about this? Let's build NORAD and we'll go from there. Now, NORAD might be destroyed on a Saab Gripen deal where Donald Trump says, that's it, NORAD's no more, which would be the dumbest thing ever. But I'm all for getting out of NATO. But NORAD we need. You know what I mean? Like it's just a necessity. Canada and the United States are so integrated on the NORAD thing, and it makes so much sense. Um, you know, but Canada's in a worse spot than it was in the Cold War. We don't have the, thousands of fighter aircraft that we had. 1,800 F-86s, Sabres, nearly 700s, CF-100s, nearly 700 Voodoos, 350 Starfighters, 70 some odd, or 80 F-5s. We don't have that anymore. We have 60 remaining CF-100s that are flyable out of the 97 that are left, because there's been a few crashes, and the rest have been cannibalized for parts. And we only have about 50 pilots that are actually, still combat ready, right? Because people are just leaving because, it's like, well, we never get to fly because the airplanes are always grounded due to maintenance, stuff like that, waiting for parts. Hence, when you build stuff in your country, you're usually not waiting for parts as much. It happens. I mean, it's happening to the German Air Force. It's happening to the Americans. I mean, like all their other legacy aircraft take back seat for parts to the F-35, right? To the point where we're building parts, and other people around the world are building parts for the F-35 just to keep those damn things running for the Americans. You know what I mean? And the odd person gets the actual aircraft. We don't have these aircraft yet. And is it a good idea for us to have them with the political instability? This is the decision Canada has to make. Are we sovereign or are we not? And if we aren't sovereign, we take on this American equipment that could possibly be sabotaged in a combat. You never know. You know what I mean? Or if you build it yourself, yes, it's a lot to build up the industry, but this was what the Avro Aero was doing, was building up industry. But, oh no, it's too expensive, we can't do that. And it turns political, and then people just don't have any, they can't think past Wednesday, you know what I mean? But the bottom line is that Canada needs stopgap. We got a big country, we need to have equipment everywhere. The problem is, and this is another thing that the defense ministers are saying, is that yes, we need F-35s or Saab Gripens, whichever it's going to be, but we also need submarines, we also need dishwashers, we need apartments, we need boots, we need small arms, we need tires for vehicles, we need generators. Like, it's not just one thing you're buying for the military, right? Your budget has to satisfy all your needs, and there's a lot of them. And nobody ever takes that into the consideration of the argument, right? So yes, a Saab Gripen might be a great idea, because it leaves more cash left over for the Navy, for the Air Force, for the packing up and moving forces members across the country. Nobody talks about that. They just talk about the glamorous on the battlefield stuff, but it's all the other stuff. The dental care, all that stuff you got to pay for too. Like I say, Veterans Affairs, all that stuff. I know we're horrible on the Veterans Affairs, but every country is. So, when you join the military, you have to understand that your country's going to betray you on the Veterans Affairs. There's no country that doesn't. Oh, the veterans are asking too much. Remember under Trudeau? Go with that mentality. So you're serving your country with the idea that you might get PTSD or severely maimed or harmed or whatever. But you have to understand it's going to be a thankless job, because if you can't accept that now, don't sign up, because that's always been the case. That's always been the case. World War I, there was no Veterans Affairs in World War I. All those guys, imagine surviving World War I in the trench warfare, coming back and everybody's saying, okay, yeah, you've been bludgeoning people to death with trench clubs for the last and watching people blown to pieces with artillery for the last past 4 years and choking on freaking anthrax and mustard gas. But now we need you to behave in society normal, right? And then in World War II, we started getting Veterans Affairs, and after Korea, but we always hear the same thing. Always, always, always. We need help, Gulf War syndrome. Fuck the veterans. You know what I mean? Yeah, you just suck it up. Why? Because that's what happens. But there is money that goes there, right? But the money that goes there doesn't go into the Gripens. It doesn't go into the F-35s. It doesn't go into the KAS 3 submarines. It doesn't go into that stuff. So there's a lot of equipment that has to be bought, maintained. We've got a big problem in the Canadian military with mechanics and stuff. And again, with a woke military, it's hard to get recruitment because nobody wants to be told, yelled at by a man in a dress, right? like they got to ditch that. They really have to. Like, again, call me politically incorrect, whatever. But the sooner you get rid of woke, okay. If you look at military recruitment videos, okay, we looked at the U.S. one with the My Two Moms one, the girl with the lesbian and overcoming this and over. Yeah, it will appeal to those people. But those aren't the people that usually fight. If you look around the world, okay, it's not progressive people fighting. It's genocidal maniacs, mercenaries fighting. Azov Battalion is neo-Nazis, okay? What's called Wagner Group is like Chechen rebels, okay? The ISIS guys are U.S. and Israeli-backed, and Al Qaeda rebranded, right? To liberate. These are the most genocidal people you could have fighting, right? You've got the French Foreign Legion. They're all over Angola and Mali and places like that. Why? Because these are the guys that sign up to murder people, right? Now the thing is there's an ethical Blackwater, now known as the faculty. Yeah, machine gunning innocent Iraqis. Having fun. Yeah, okay, yeah. Horrible stuff. I get that. Right? How dare you say that? Yes, but you're missing the point. These are the guys that are really good at killing. Right? So the question is do you want them out there as mercenaries? Or would you rather just have them controlled on a leash with ethics in your military? And you're not going to get those guys. And again, it started with the disbanding of our airborne. Okay, there was some bad PR there, granted, some hazing stuff, and it was bad. Okay, let's disband the whole fucking group. These guys go back to the Devil's Brigade. You know what I mean? These were your most insane soldiers that you had in World War II. These guys but they got the job done, and that's who you want, right? So you got to get rid of the woke, or you're not going to get recruitment. And using foreigners to recruit is not going to work either, because you got to think about loyalty. Like, everybody's loyal until the bullets start flying, right? And you could see this in Ukraine as well. Like, I mean, you could see, like, who wants to fight, who doesn't want to fight, right? And I admire the Ukrainians. They are losing the war, sure, but, their will to fight is there, right? So they just don't have all the training. It's not even about the equipment. They had lots of equipment. They didn't have the training. And that is so crucial. It doesn't really matter if you've got an old MiG-29 in the air. Again, the MiG-29 has a bad track record, but you got to think of the pilots that were getting shot down. Most of them didn't have a lot of training. The best Iraqi pilots did score hits against the U.S. Air Force with MiG-29s and MiG-25s, old MiG-25s. A pair of really good Iraqi pilots in old MiG-25s nearly took out a pair of F-15s. The F-15s were in the fight of their lives, and they dealt with these MiG-25 pilots a few times before they were actually able to shoot them down. And this is, an airplane that's not designed for rolling dogfights. But the tactics of the Iraqis were good enough. The problem is they didn't have enough pilots like that to, the average American pilot was far superior because of the training, right? What you see in the Ukraine. The Ukrainian pilots, they were probably on par with most of the Russian pilots that they've been encountering. The problem is the Russians, problem for the Ukrainians is the Russians had the updated versions of airplanes that they designed and knew exactly how to beat because they designed them. It's like, oh, well, here's the weak points of the first gen Su-27s and MiG-29s, right? So it's like, you got to factor that stuff in. So Canada with an F-35, when the Americans know how to shut them off, might not be a great idea. Well, you say, well, what would keep us from the Saab doing the same thing? Well, not much, but there could be, the caveat is it depends on what's in the deal with Saab. Like, if the deal with Saab is, okay, yeah, we'll use their system, but while you're using their system, you're going to build a system of your own, like the Brits did, like the Israelis did, so that if you do have F-35s or you do have Saabs, They can be used with to communicate with NATO and all that stuff, because that, again, it's not just about the aircraft itself. It's the whole package, right? So you could design a system like that that could be compatible with multiple systems. So let's say you can link in with the BAE system, the Leonardo system, the Echelon system, and all the Raytheon stuff, and as well as the Saab systems. Well, pretty much you've got all NATO covered, and we'll call it the Canuck system, whatever. Okay, it can communicate with any allied aircraft or whatever. That's going to take time to develop, and it's going to cost money. So how many Saab Gripens do we need? Well, ideally, if we wanted to have an elite air force of Saab Gripens, okay, we would have to have at least 2,600 of them. Now, the cost of that, I know. That's why we have to build it in our own country. So the Saab Gripen might not be, we're probably never going to have that, but the minimum would be 300. That is what we need, minimum 300 to cover the country, okay? And that is at a massive, massive disadvantage to the thousands of aircraft the Russians have and the Chinese. Because remember, Canada is the monkey in the middle. You've got a superpower to the north of us, i.e. Russia, that, the Cold War stuff to now, is a hostile potential. And if it gets into the fight with the United States, we're the monkey in the middle battleground, right? So we have to say, no, none of you guys are going to fly into our territory. We've got the Chinese, which are partnership with the Russians and are trying to make moves in the Arctic, right? Which Canada has got new Arctic patrol ships and soon to have new destroyers to counter that, right? We're going to need aircraft to protect those ships as well, and drones and what have you. And yeah, so China and Russia are two major threats. And guess what? They're both going to be coming over the North Pole, because the Chinese are going to work with the Russians. They're not going to fly across the Pacific to get to us. They're going to, they're going to island hop as they did in World War II, like the Japanese did in World War II near the Alaskan Peninsula, right? And come across that strait, the Alaskan Strait there, where the mammoths used to come over. It used to be a mammoth highway. And then, of course, to the south of us, we now have, if we use Juro Salente's rules here, currency war, trade war, shooting war, we're in a trade war with the United States. So the final version of that is shooting war. You know what I mean? Will it happen? It's very likely. Not soon, but down the road, at the rate we're going, it could deteriorate to that. Do we really want to be buying the superpower, be caught between three superpowers that would all love to have Canada's resources? It's kind of like, think of Canada like a lady walking around in like a $30,000 fur coat with gold necklaces, a crown on, gold rings, a Louis Vuitton bag, the most expensive of everything, and just really loud about it, okay? And walking through like the slums of Harlem, you know what I mean? At like 2 o'clock in the morning in a back alley, like that kind of volume, that kind of like, oh, well, no, there's nothing, everybody, I'm glamorous, everybody loves me, right? Well, Canada is like that with our resources. Like we think nobody would ever attack us for our resources, when we're the country with the most resources overall in the world. You never say never, never say never. And history shows that when economies get really bad, a lot of times bordering nations go to war with each other. So again, I'm not saying it's a done deal, but it is looking very bad for Canada-US relations. If they don't get any worse than what they are, that's okay. But they're going to get worse because of the political, right? And it's just Canadians bad, Americans bad, blah, 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 everybody's bad, right? And the problem is that's going to affect trade deals. Carney is already out in front of this, whether you like the man or you don't like the man. He can already see he already understands we're not going back to we're buying everything from the United States and allowing the United States to have complete rickshaw over our economy like we have, just because it's, a little bit comfortable for us. But they get to their great benefit that we don't compete with them and everything like that. Now we're starting to compete with the United States, and it's showing. We've got a lot of trade deals on the go right now, which is what we should have been doing since the Avro Arrow. But the thing is that we gave up on our things, saying, oh, it's just too expensive to develop our own stuff, not realizing it's more about sovereignty than just about the bottom line, right? And that's what's going to be the real decision maker, is what are we willing to destroy in relationship with the United States and gain with the Swedes? What are we just using the Swedes to get a better deal with the Americans? I don't know. We'll know when we know. Or is it we'll make a deal with both of them, but we never see any, again, it should not take you 10 years to get a fucking fighter aircraft. Sorry for the language, but like the F-35 took way too long, way too long. Saab Gripen, it was up and running, pretty, like it took longer than what it probably should have. But I mean, you're talking about a very, very small country with a small GDP. It's highly impressive what they did with what they had, right? But that seems to be the Swedish model, is, use your brains over the bronze. It's best if you can have both, but if you can only have one, go with something that you can manage, you can handle. And I know the Saab Gripen Canada, if we can maintain the F-18s, the Saab Gripen will be a cinch for us. You know what I mean? It's just the time it takes to learn all those systems, which probably isn't going to take it anywhere near as long as what we think, right? But especially for the Saab Gripen. But it will take a couple of years to get that up and running. Now, the thing about the Saab Gripen is we won't probably have to change infrastructure too much, because it's a smaller airplane than the F-18. So we don't have to build new hangars for this thing, because we could probably get an extra 2 Saab Gripens in the hangars just because of the shorter wingspan. You know what I mean? There's stuff like that. So anyway, that's my take on it. I'd like to hear you guys what you think on it. I know these videos go on forever, but I love really getting into detail on stuff like this, and where I can do it on YouTube, I will. But my whole thing is this, is that the Saab Gripen, overall, if you were to think about it, in a long, prolonged war, and we had to be 100% self-reliant, if we can set up not just assembly in Canada, but actual production of the aircraft, and produce all our own parts and stuff like that. So we are completely 100% self-reliant, the same way the Swedes are, the same way the Americans are, the same way the Russians are, the same way the French are, the same way the British are, and the Chinese. It's, I think, more about using a partnership to get to sovereignty. So we use the Saab Gripen to get to maybe the Saab Fenveer that they're talking about now, that they're talking about having a 6th generation aircraft in about 2 years from now. Again, we'll believe it when we see it. So they say 2 years, so make it 6. You know what I mean? But that said, we're in World War III right now in the shooting stage, but it's isolated to the Ukraine. Hopefully it doesn't expand more than that, but if it did, we need stuff now. So here's what I would do if I was in Carney's position. Okay, going with the idea of stopgap. Now, this would have all kinds of logistic problems and stuff like that, but it could be solved faster than 2035. And that would be to go to the Germans saying, look, you have 3,600 Leopard tanks of all variants. How many can you part with? Ones running, ones that need to get up and running. What do they take? Whatever. They've already been doing this for the Ukraine. So we know right away we can get about 200 to 300 that are sitting in mothball right away. And possibly, say, up to 1,000 Leopard 1s. Possibly 500 to 1,000 Leopard 2s. And possibly 400 or 500 Leopard 2A4s. And maybe 100 Leopard 2A6s. And then the rest could be miscellaneous. Right? And if we get that, okay, now you're talking about common tanks and 2,600 of them, right? You disperse them 200 per province and territory. You've got some good coverage there. We have 900 labs already and about 400 on the way with the Lab 6 with the upgrades, right? Okay, we got those. Our ADATs, the 30 air defense ADAT systems are in mothballs. We need to make new missiles, okay? It might take us 2 or 3 years to make a new ADATS missile and, whatever. Maybe we adapt the Spike missiles to that and some other missiles, whatever, as a stopgap. Get those things up and running. Get them around the country. They're short-range air defense systems, which is not enough. But we have another 1,100 M113s there that some of them could, if we could have 260 of them converted to air defense, short range air defense, we'd at least have that, right? Get training up on it. I mean, yeah, I know you got to get the personnel, but sometimes, like, don't worry about having more equipment than personnel. You know what I mean? Like, grow into it. You know what I mean? Fighters, the easiest route, not the best route, okay, is work on the Saab Gripen deal. Just buy those 16 F35s. Just do that and cancel the rest, or just leave the thing in limbo. Leave it in limbo, or whatever, right? And go with the Saab deal, okay. See how many we get, right? But it's going to be a while before we can get either aircraft. Even if we were to say yes to one of them or both of them today, it's probably still going to be another 10 years before you see a single aircraft, right? Maybe with the Saabs, we might see them in 4 or 5 years. But let's say we go around, we go to Germany again, say, okay, Germany and the UK and Spain and Italy, and we say, those tornadoes, how many got left? Okay, can we get 200? But between all of these, can we get 200 of those? And they say, okay, we got to start building parts for them again and stuff like that. But just get them, because it'd be easier to modify parts and get a parts industry going than an actual production line, right? You could do that right away. You're just basically putting parts on older airframes, okay? Now we got those. Now we're independent of the United States, even if it's older aircraft, whatever. Very high maintenance aircraft, but we got them. Germany, Spain, Turkey, UK. How many of those F4 Phantoms do you still have? Germany, well, out of the 400, we still have 200 left in parts, in mop-up. Can they get in flying condition? Let's say we can get 200 out of the batch. Okay, we get maybe another 100 from Turkey. We get, I don't know how many Turkey had, but we get those. Okay, they're old, whatever. But we end up with, say, 500 to 600 of those. Okay, now we're at 800 aircraft. Okay, they're older, they're a stopgap, but now we got coverage around the country, divided. Let's go for broke. And again, I know the cost of this would be astronomical, but go for broke. Okay, France, where did all your Mirage 3s go and Mirage F1s? Can we get 100 Mirage F1s and maybe, say, 400 Mirage F1s? Okay, now we're at 1,300 aircraft. Okay, well, now we're getting into Canadian territory. Maybe we find some old Voodoos, some old Starfighters. Maybe we can, get a couple of hundred of those. Go to Poland. Say, hey, look, you want to get rid of some of your old MiG-29s? Can we get between Germany and Poland? You still have between the two, you have at least 100 MiG-29s. Okay, we'll take those. Okay, we'll have to build parts for them, whatever. We got that. So this is like a 10-year plan before their new aircraft show up, right? So we got those. Okay, maybe we get some other aircraft coming in. We go to the Brits. Say, how many Harriers can you spare? 100. Okay, all variants. Okay, well, we'll go with 100. Okay, let's see what we can keep flying, right? Eurofighters. Okay, well, maybe we get 10 of those. Okay, fine. What else could we find? Let's see. Oh, okay, there's some old Starfighters, some F5s. Okay, we get a couple hundred of those. But then we get some old MiG-21s. We get, MiG-23s. Okay, you don't want those as frontline fighters, but they could be used as an interceptor, whatever. You don't really have to upgrade them. You just have to have really sophisticated ground radars that can still communicate with them and just, modify them to be able to fire modern long-range weapons even beyond their capability. The aircraft is just basically a missile truck or a bomb truck. Okay, definitely not going to be on the front line, but we go to the French and we say, okay, we know you're not part of the Five Eyes. How many Mirage 2000s can you spare? Oh, 10. Okay, fine, we got those. What about the Rafales? Well, they're backlogged, but we can give you 10 for now. Lend-lease. Okay, submarines. Okay, we got our Victoria class. Okay, see if we can beef up the parts on that. We know they got to be, basically replaced, but we go to Germany again, say, hey, how many of those, U-212s and 214s and U-31s can you spare us? Oh, we'll do a lend-lease with you for 2. Okay, so now we're at 6 submarines. Okay, we're halfway to what we need. Okay, it's going to be a bitch to keep them running, but again, you'll cycle everything. So even if you're only each submarine is only at sea for, 3 days, whatever, between them all, you can basically have them 365 days a year because you're going to buy more submarines. You're going to go to Chile. Remember those French Scorpion subs you were going to sell us back in the 90s? Yeah. What do you want for them now? Well, they're still working, and they're like, oh, we'll sell them to you for this. Okay, now we're at, what are we at? We're at 9 submarines. Okay, fine. We're getting there. We'll go to France, say, hey, can you spare us 3 more Scorpion class? Sure. Lend lease? Sure. Maybe 2 of your older nuclear powered subs. Okay, so we're now at 12, 14 submarines. Okay, get all our Halifax class frigates back in, maybe pull the 2 remaining destroyers out of mothball until the Type 26 comes along. Okay, so you don't have to use this stuff at all times, but you can keep it in mothball. You know what I mean? But you have numbers. Okay, let's get some Gepards from Germany. How many can you spare? We can give you 100. Okay, fine. There's Oerlikon 35 millimeter air defense systems that used to be used with the ADATs anyway, so why not have both, right? Okay, go to Sweden. How many CV90s can you give us? Well, you were prepared to buy 106 of them from us the last time, but we built a few more since then of all these different variants. Okay, well, you get 200. Okay, there we go. So we got the APCs covered pretty good. Go back to Germany. How many M109s do you still have left? We got 68. What do you got? Well, we could give you another, say, we can bring you up to 260, but we could also lend lease you the PZF 2000s, 260 of those. Okay, so now every province has at least 20 of everything, right? So now you're talking about invasion proof. Okay, artillery guns. There's not a lot of M777s out there, and we're finding out that stationary artillery guns they worked in Iraq, they worked in Afghanistan because the Iraqis only had mortars, they didn't really have artillery guns. But at the end of the day, yeah, you need to be moving because the Ukraine says drones find artillery guns like crazy. First and last Pepsi of the day. See how I do. Okay, I'm craving already. Anyway, no, I got to cut down on those. So, but anyway, you get the idea. So there's the stopgap stuff. And then while you're doing this, okay, let's say we get the Saab Gripens up and going by 2027. Okay, so we're no longer assembling Saab Gripens in Canada. We're now building the state-of-the-art Saab Gripen in Canada and a whole new system that is not compatible with the other system. But we can build 10 Saab Gripens a week or 20. We'll say 20 a week. I know that's a huge number. But we'll say we get outfitted for that. Out of the 2,600 old aircraft that we have and our 60 remaining CF-18s, okay, we start phasing out the oldest aircraft first and training the new pilots, okay? So we'll have 2,600 pilots or maybe even 7,800 pilots, so we have 3 to 1 for every aircraft. But most of the aircraft will be sitting on the ground ready to go in ready status. But like say we fly like, 26 of each per month. Okay, so your F4 Phantom pilot gets 10 hours of flying a month on the F4 Phantom. Okay, fine. Then he gets 10 hours a month on the new Saab Gripen. Okay, fine. And then he gets 10 hours on the CF-18. And then he gets 10 hours on some other aircraft. Okay. It's 520 hours of flying at the end of the year with a lot of different aircraft, learning a lot of stuff. Okay, and the Saab Gripen will be every week after 2027, starting in January, we'll say, you've got 20 new aircraft coming in that are Saab Gripens, and everybody learns the Saab Gripen, right? That'll be the common airplane. But week 1, you have 20 aircraft. Week 2, you have 40. You have 520 of each of these aircraft that phase out the old aircraft by the end of 2027 into 2028. Wishful thinking, I get it. But that's what it would take. And you just keep phasing them out of the old aircraft, right? And then by the time you get to 2035, you have all 2,600 Saab Gripens, but by that time you might have replaced those with the Fenvirs, the 6th generation aircraft, which will lead you into the 2070s, right? Because it'll be whatever. And you're 100% building it in your own country. And maybe you took a little bit from the Fenvir program, the Eurofighter Typhoon program, the Saab Gripen program, a little bit from the F-35 program, and whatever future programs, and maybe even the British Typhoon or Tempest program that may or may not go, and you build Avro Aero Gen 6, right? And so Aero 206 is actually a Gen 6 airplane, or maybe 207. But there was 11 or 12 Avro Aero started, but only 6 completed. But then we get all the capabilities of every modern superfighter, the stealth, the everything, and we have our own weapons industry. We don't rely on anybody else, and we have thousands of aircraft, thousands of tanks or drones or whatever is going to dominate the battlefield. Drones and cruise missiles seem to be the thing, and the Saab could be the stepping stone for that. So I think I've went on long enough for this. That's my take on it. There's a bit of fantasy and wishful thinking there. I get it. But I can tell you right now, having 80 tanks in service and, like the Leopard 2A4s, 24, the numbers are this, that at last count, is that we don't really have any Leopard 1s or 2s left in stock. I think they're gone. We might have a handful of Leopard 2s that we use in training. Leopard 2A4s, there's about 80 to 100 of those. There's about 24 2A6s, and that's our most advanced tank, except for whatever they upgraded the 2A4s. And we've got 60 CF-18s. That's our only multi-role fighter. We have 24 155 or 156 Hawk trainers. I won't bother going with the trainers before. We have a few other trainers. We have 3 P3 Orions left that are in service out of the 16 or 20 that we had. And they're going to need replacing too. And hopefully we replace those with our new Bombardier sub-hunters and electronic warfare aircraft rather than buying American stuff. Because we're selling that stuff to, for example, there's one guy, he did a video on the Saab Gripen. And the guy's a smart guy, and I've caught he's more conservative, whatever. But I think he sits in the center for most things. Right-leaning, kind of like myself, where I try to take see all sides of the argument. But what he got wrong was when he was critiquing the liberal, because the guy doesn't like the liberals, obviously, neither do I. But the thing is that he was critiquing the Saab Gripen deal from the wrong Saab Gripen. Sweden did something very weird that most aircraft manufacturers don't do. Is they gave the Gripen name to 2 distinctly different aircraft types. So you have a fighter version, but you also have this Bombardier, built in Canada, I guess, Bombardier jet, executive jet, known as the Globe 6000 or 6500. And we also have the 8000 that we're shopping around the world as a luxury, kind of think like Learjet on steroids, or the Globemaster on competitor. But instead of taking it as a luxury airliner, what we've done to them is we turn them into electronic surveillance aircraft. And also we have a design where it's basically a replacement for the Auroras if we do it. But because we buy all our equipment from the Americans, one of the agreements of, that was made after the fall of the Avro Aero was that Canada didn't develop its weapons industry, right? And in turn, they'll get, reliable and the best deal of weapons from the United States. But we see that's not the case. But we do build stuff. It's just we don't buy it for ourselves other than labs. And we're the number one. We have more labs than any other country in the world, which is light armored vehicles. They are a good vehicle. They're a good vehicle, but we need more variants of them. We can't just go with the Coyote variant was a very clever one. It was good. The Americans have it. We have it. We need a new version of that with the Lab 6 and stuff like that. But I digress. But we need an ADATS version of Labs. You know what I mean? So that we don't have to have the regular, M113 Lab air defense systems. We can, we need air defense, like ASAP. Even more than fighters, we need air defense. But one of the critical components to air defense is electronic warfare aircraft and surveillance aircraft, which the P3 Orion is more of a maritime patrol aircraft and doubles back as an electronic warfare surveillance aircraft, right? That's what Canada has. We call it the CP-140 Aurora. They call it the P-3 Orion. But the P-8 Poseidon is a dedicated electronic warfare aircraft with some anti-submarine hunting capabilities. This is where the Bombardier aircraft comes in, which we are selling to Sweden. But when we sell it to Sweden, we don't call it the Globe 65 or 6000, 6500 or 6000. They call it the Gripen. So this guy is making a video about, hey, we're already building these in our country. It's not a fighter. It's an actual reconnaissance aircraft. Why are we arguing over this? Which, of course, if you caught that, if you looked at that, yeah, of course it wouldn't make any sense whatsoever. It's like, how are we saying we're going to replace our CF-18s with these things? These things are not even fighters. They're basically airliners with electronic warfare equipment on it. And it's like, okay, it's because Sweden named their fighter Gripen and their I think it's the Gripen G. So you got the Gripen A, B, and C, I believe, is the first ones. And now you have the E and the F model. The F model, I believe, is the tandem seat, and the E model is that really sexy single seat one with the fancy paint job. Yeah, that everybody likes, right? But the G model is an actual similar to the Gulfstream that the Americans made. It's the Bombardier 6500 Globe. That's what it is, and that works with the Sweden with the Saab. That's what I mean. So like this is already integrated with, like, we already got the system that we're building that's already complementary to a jet that we could possibly buy. Where if we buy the F-35, then we kind of have to finish that deal with the P-8 Poseidons, which is a more expensive and older airplane. Where we're already building an airplane that could be outfitted to be electronic warfare. With a few variants of these Bombardier jets. You know, if you want a bigger one, you want a smaller one, you can order whatever you want. And of course, we could also configure it to be a maritime patrol anti-submarine warfare, dropping torpedoes and stuff, and anti-shipping missiles. So I'm thinking, let's give Bombardier the business, but build it 100% here in Canada so that our weapons industry are not relying on a supply chain across a border somewhere. Doesn't matter if it's the Americans or the Germans or the Swedes or whoever. It's that if something happens to Sweden and the Russians and the Swedes go to war, and we rely on parts for our aircraft that come from Sweden or the United States or Germany or whatever, we have to be able to build it here. But we need a stopgap, and that was what we did with having the Voodoo, the CF-100s, the F-86 Sabres, the F-5s, the Starfighters, all in service kind of at the same time. Yes, it was a nightmare to keep all these fleets ready, but what we found was there was merits to having multiple types of aircraft. The Americans still understand this. They just try to package all those aircraft into the F-35, but they still need the F-22 and the F-15. They still need F-18s. They still need the Super Hornet. They still need the A-6 Prowlers. They still need those airplanes. They haven't the F-35, and they need the Harrier, right? The F-35 is good at kind of doing it all, but like the M16 in Vietnam, it's not going to be the service rifle, the battle rifle, the sniper rifle. It's not going to. It's just going to really be one thing. It's going to be a carbine. That's it. Even though it's built into the AR-15 platform or whatever, which is great overall, but it doesn't do everything. You know what I mean? And the F-35, as amazing as it can be, even if it works as advertised, is still not 100% a one airplane air force. But numbers account for a lot. Like you could have, and again, the Russians are showing us this, that the airplanes that work for them, it comes down to three. It's basically the airplane that works the best for them in combat is the Su-34. It's their best ground attack aircraft they have because it replaces the cumbersome of two large bombers of the Tu-160. It doesn't completely replace it, but it's more robust. It's more versatile. It's an airplane that has a long enough range that it could be a long-range medium fighter bomber. It has enough agility as a fighter to outrun a Patriot missile. Maybe it won't do it every time, but it has there's no way a Tu-22 can outrun a Patriot missile or outmaneuver it. There's no way it can do it. There's no way a Tu-160 can outrun a Patriot missile. These are huge bombers, some of the largest bombers in the world. And, this is also what's happening to the B-1 Lancer and the B-2 bombers and the B-52s, is they're becoming obsolete just because they're so big and cumbersome. The B-52 can be shot down from hundreds of miles away because it's so easy to detect. But it carries so much. You know what I mean? You could level 10-mile strips with conventional World War II style bombs with a B-52 like they did in Vietnam. The bombing of the Ho Chi Minh Trail. You know what I mean? So I'm not at the point where I think we need 100 different types of aircraft. But we were at the point in 1959 where we were starting to specialize. And and at a time when we had a lot, like the Starfighter, why we had the Starfighters was that they could deliver the air genies, okay, really fast. The Starfighter wasn't the best low-level aircraft for sure, but it was a great aircraft for what it was designed to do. Zoom up, roll over, come down on top of the bomber, shoot the shit out of them, right? The Germans used this tactic very well. In their training, Norway did it, we did it, the Americans did it, and the Starfighter did that, but it was a very short-range interceptor. The Voodoos, well, they dealt with the short-range part. They were almost as fast as the Starfighters. They could carry more payload. They were slightly more advanced, and they did everything, but they were more expensive, they were higher maintenance, etc., etc. So you get the idea of what ends up happening here, right? That it really does come down to that there is no one does it all. It's just, can you make it work well with everything else? Because the problem with the Gripen is the Gripen or the F-35 cannot carry the big freaking what do you call it, the 3,500 pound bomb that the Su-34 carries, right? They just can't do that. There's no way to hook that bomb on. Like the landing gear would be off the ground. There's no way they could get off the ground with that thing. So like not every aircraft is going to have the same capabilities. Obviously, it would be a lot, as scary as it would be. I'd rather be dodging surface to air missiles in a Saab Gripen than an Su-34. And stuff like that, you know what I mean? Like it's better. Obviously, the stealth angle of the F-35 is a huge game changer. But is it the be-all, end-all, and the most survivable? I don't think so, because if you have these Bombardier Gripens flying around for the Swedes, detecting targets for you hundreds of miles away, way outside the kill zone of most air defense systems, your Saab Gripens can sneak in and get those data links and do the same job the F-35 can do. So these are things you have to compare. I just think the problem is that it's going to be more of a political hurdle, like every fighter jet. Like it was politics that killed the Avro Arrow, and really bad, like long-term thinking under the naivety of Diefenbaker. Yes, I am a conservative person, but I hate Diefenbaker because it's not what the Avro Arrow was. It's what it represented coming for the future. Because a lot of people don't realize this, but whether you believe the Americans went to the moon or not, on the Black Friday when the Avro Arrow Company or Avro Canada closed, and that was the end of the Avro Arrow, you have to understand what happened to the Canadian technology. Now, there was a lot of propaganda, spies and stuff like that. And I do believe there are spies in the Avro program. I have no doubts about that. And I believe because of Avro Arrow technology is why you got the MiG-25, right? Which, look at what that thing did. That thing still does. There's about 500 of those around the world. I don't know how many in service, maybe a handful, maybe probably less than 50, I would imagine. But they're out there. The Brits were like, okay, well, Avro Canada, like the Avro Arrow, okay, scared the Canadian ingenuity, scared the shit out of the Americans, the French, the British, and the Soviets, right? At the time, they're like, Canada builds that fucking thing? It's like it's 85 feet long. It's huge. It's fast. It's terrifying. It's higher than any other aircraft that ever came before it. like we're doomed. Like the Soviets had to look at that thing and say, we're doomed. We need something bigger and faster. So yes, but if you're going to make the argument of spies in the Avro Aero program, and then make an argument for a multicultural society building an F-35, thinking that there's no spy. How many Chinese people are working in the F-35 program? You telling me that the Chinese can just bang come up with J-20s and J-36s and J-15s all in like a span of a short couple of years, when we know they've been stealing this technology from us, when they've been building parts for the F-35, such as chips and stuff? Yeah. I mean, it's all coming out now. Like, it is a bit of a farce at the end of the day. But one of the things is that the Avro Aero basically was a self-reliant, self-sufficient aircraft being built in Canada that would not rely on a foreign, supply chain, and it would be immune to political, like the trade wars and stuff like that, right? So the Brits saw it. They're like, oh my God, they were gonna sell us like these Hunter aircraft, which were good aircraft. Don't get me wrong, but they weren't the Avro Aero. And they're like, holy shit, the Canadians could really build an aircraft. They went out of business. Yeah, we better get over there and get some of those engines. So it comes out now that if Aero 206 did get away, I don't think it did, but if it did, it went to the UK. That's where it went. But if not, that's where most of the engines and the mighty Orenda engines and the mighty Iroquois engines, those things were like 30 some odd £1,000 thrust class engines. There were several variants there, the way they built these engines. They built ones for fuel efficiency and testing, and then they built ones for, let's see if we can burn the ass end off of this airplane, making it climb like a homesick angel. But the point I'm getting at is that that's an aircraft that was 100% suited to the RCAF. And how do we build the nearly 700 of them that were required? That's what we would have never bought the Voodoos, and we would have had something that would have done the job, but they would have been replaced by something else eventually. And this is where we're at today, where, okay, the Bombardier, we'll call it the Bombardier Gripen, okay, electronic warfare aircraft, could be our next maritime patrol. So we're, okay, well, it's built in Canada. We got the electronic warfare aircraft, so we don't need to buy the P-8 Poseidon. It's a Bombardier, and again, I know there's parts from around the world in it and whatever, but we can wean ourselves off of that. Version 1, okay, we got to do this, but okay, now let's that assembly line is already going. Now we've got our data link, okay? We might not have the satellites capabilities of the Americans, but we got an aircraft that could be an earthbound satellite. Maybe we add an extra 50 feet to the wing so it could fly at 90,000 feet or something stupid like that and specialize the engines, right? It can be done. And if it did, I mean, it'd be the ultimate satellite, an airliner flying around at 90 to 100,000 feet. Sure, the MiG-31 could get it, but you'd be seeing the MiG-31 1,000 miles away. You know what I mean? Any fighter that would benefit from this link system, which could be completely proprietary to Canada, not built with Chinese chips in it. You know what I mean? And we could do that. And then we could take on the Gripen, and therefore, when we did, the F-35 losses and all the economic, economy shutdowns and job losses that would occur under the U.S. retaliation to not buying the F-35s, because that's what it's most likely going to be, is they're going to cut off trade with us and business. And what they'll probably do, and I'm kind of hoping Trump does this, because it'll be our advantage in the long time. It'll be a political nightmare for Carney for sure, but I don't really care about him anyway, because I know it will spark Trump has sparked nationalism in Canada that I've never seen in my entire life. I'm 52. And I'm as dyed-in-the-wool, proud Canadian, ensign flag, old stock Canadian, love my heritage, love my people. I know exactly what a Canadian is. Yes, we're a real country. I know the 250 years of bloodshed, what it built. And I'm very aware of my history. Okay? And this is why most people are not nationalists, because they're not aware of their history. Once you become aware of your history, you tend to become more nationalist. And national pride, the Avro Aero was big defeat in national pride, especially when, whether you believe, like I was saying, whether you believe it or not, that the Americans went to the moon, which I believe they did, but the moon lander, that was designed by the Avro Aero guys. So the Russians, whatever data they got, they that's what they were probably most likely, again, we don't know for sure, but that's probably where they were able to come up with the MiG-25 out of nowhere. This like hyper fighter, like the MiG-25, even by today's standards, holds a lot of world records for like climb rates and altitude. And I mean, it operates at 80,000 feet, even by today's standards. Almost no American aircraft operates at that altitude, other than the U-2 and the SR-71. You know what I mean? And even at that, the MiG-31, its replacement is basically able to intercept the SR-71. Hence why the Americans gave up on the SR-71. Well, they didn't give up on it, but they can't fly it over the Soviet Union with impunity like they could, right? They could outrun the MiG-25 slightly, but they couldn't outrun the missiles of the MiG-31, which was slightly slower than the SR-71, but capable of catching it. Now, Avro Aero 3 would have been a Mach 3 aircraft, right? So even by today's standards, the Avro Aero, it still offered everything Canada needed. It just would have to evolve into something modern, which would probably look something like a Eurofighter or something by today's standards in Gen 4. So the thing is that if we had the Moonlander designed by Canadians, the TSR-2 that was using Avro Aero engines when the British were testing that, and the TSR-2 was at the time one of their like wonder bombers. Same problem that Avro Aero had was cost overrun and politics killed it. But everybody said that would have been the fastest nuclear bomber ever built. And at the time, that's kind of the way the Soviets were going, was just these incredibly high-speed, long-range bombers that would fly their mission, and in the last legs of their mission, they'd fly it at supersonic speeds. And the emphasis was just on speed, was survival. Now, that doesn't really work as much because missiles are faster, and they turn better. So we get into that. And then we get another area where things get interesting, is that the Americans didn't want us to have a fighter that was better than what they had, the Delta Darts and Daggers at the time. The F-4 Phantom wasn't quite in service, right? But the thing is that the Avro Aero, with all those specs that I gave you, again, it was higher than the F-4 Phantom, probably climbed about the same in empty weight, but with combat payloads, the F-4 Phantom could carry more, and it had slightly better visibility. Neither original version of the Avro Aero or the F-4 Phantom had an internal cannon. That was later added to the F-4 Phantoms. But the Aero probably would have ended up with one, and then eventually ended up with some sort of a bubble canopy, the Gen 4 version of it, and it would still be Mach 3. So it would be basically the MiG-31 meets the Gen 5 Avro Aero is the MiG-31 at Mach 3.2 at 80,000 feet with basically F-22 stealth with, list goes on and on and on and on, right? So that's what we gave up, right? So that's what we have to get back again. And we can do this using the Saab. It's just the political fallout will be, oh my God, you destroyed 1,600 jobs. You wrecked the relationship with the Americans, even though it's Donald Trump taking the jabs at us mostly. Most of the arguments, when you listen to the American ambassador and stuff like that, is jabs at Canada. I'm not saying the Americans don't have some claims on the trade deals and stuff like that. They do have some. If you look at the details, yes, we could be a little bit more fair, on honoring our side of the aisle a bit, but you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, which they're seemingly doing. But on the other hand, their side, where they're lying, is yes, they need us. No, they are not paying for our military. No, our military, for every dollar spent, like I said, 70 to 80 cents was, basically goes to the U.S. without question, because we've agreed not to, compete with the United States with a weapons industry. We agreed to buy their stuff over anybody else's and help develop their industries, right? So they need us. We're intertwined. And that's what's stopping Donald Trump from basically just shutting off our economy. But also, that might be the bargaining chip we have so that they can't really just shut off the F-35 deal. But what I'm hoping is going to happen is Trump will just come out and say, well, just because you are talking about buying aircraft, fine. You can't buy the P-8 Poseidons. You won't get the HIMARS, which the HIMARS we may not take because the South Koreans are competing for mobile rocket systems, which are better than the American ones at the moment, and mobile artillery. So we've got other options here. It's just we have to build it here in Canada because we don't want to be relying on a supply chain from South Korea all the way over there in a war, right? And there's no reason why we shouldn't be 100% building ourselves. Problem is it's 10 years minimum just to get stuff going. So we've got other options that Carney is looking at, the over-horizon radar systems, which guess what? Saab Gripen, if it gets linked up with that, guess what? Your Saab Gripen, okay, now can see 1,000 miles ahead of it. Does stealth matter? You know what I mean? It's just how long, what's the max envelope of the missile? Okay, we can carry 3 missiles, 2 air defense missiles, okay, and 1 big-ass long-range cruise missile underneath the Saab Gripen. Okay, so you have to make 5 trips. You know what I mean? Whatever. But it doesn't matter because you got air-to-air refueling, you have an eye in the sky by Bombardier, you have another Bombardier airplane replacing our CP-140, so we don't have to buy the P-8 Poseidon or upgraded P-3 Orions. We now got it through Bombardier, which is supplying us with the brains of the operation, right? And on top of that, we'll have to make cruise missiles that can go, the 1,000 miles. We have to mimic what the Russians are doing, minimum. Most Russian long-range hypersonic missiles have like a 1,500-kilometer range. That's like 900 miles, right? So again, stealth doesn't really matter. It matters, but it's like it only matters if you have to fly directly over the target. But what they're not telling with the F-35 is that the F-35s don't fly directly over the target. They go with whatever the range of the weapon is, right? To stay as far away from the target. Why? Because when the F-117 flew over targets and opened its bomb bay doors, what you found was you got shot down. And that airplane was more stealthy. So it's all about the long range. It's about the drones and the cruise missiles. Like I said years ago, World War III would be fought that way. So anyway, I think I've done enough ranting for now. We'll see what happens. It's going to be a political nightmare no matter which way we go. Even if we do nothing, it's still not a benefit because nothing, like Carney has this, no deal is better than a bad deal. Okay, fine. That's basically, I'm not going to do anything unless I can get an amazing deal out of it. Okay, fine, I'm all for that. But nothing is also, in this scenario, look, we've been waiting for the F-35s for over 25 years now. How much longer are we going to wait for these damn things, right? Especially when we're building parts for them. And if we do get them, can we trust the partner we're buying them from? Right now, the answer is no. Maybe that'll change in the future. But, I mean, the Canadian-American trust, like Donald Trump is bad enough, backstabbing his own base right now. But he's also betrayed Canada, too. Like threatening Canada, threatening Greenland. A lot of people don't take it seriously, but they're blowing, without a declaration of war, they're blowing speedboats out of Venezuelan waters. Who are they killing? Oh, drug dealers. Well, what are the names of the drug dealers? Well, we don't know. Oh, what drugs were they in the speedboats? Oh, we don't know. We blew them up. You know what I mean? This is the people that you have to make a deal with, right? So I'm not calling all Americans out on this one, but this is the American, the American leadership right now is in batshit crazy mode. I'm not saying ours is any better, but what I'm saying is that we have to take that into consideration. Who you partner with is going to be more important than what you're partnering with. And I think the Saab Gripen could do, like I say, radar and satellites can see further than the aircrafts are not using main radar. Radar and the aircraft are kind of almost obsolete because the way the radars are going to be used is, okay, once the Russians use their S-550s and S-600 systems to shoot down your satellites, then you're turning on your aircraft radars. What happens to an aircraft when you turn on the radar? Well, ask the Ukrainians the Ukrainian pilots. They get shot down. Why? Because now we can see your aircraft like a candle. You light up like a candle on the radar because you're giving away electronic signals. So that you have to understand the F-35. If the data links are taken out or jammed or whatever, it has to turn on its radar. Which at that point, there's no difference between the stealth aircraft and the non-stealth because they're going to detect the radar frequency and hone in on that, and they'll shoot you down that way. Okay, you shut off the radars and you're getting data links, and they'll pick up the data link coming in. They just have a harder time honing in on it. So you get a lot closer to your target before you can release the weapon, right? But that said, the stealth makes you able to get even harder to hone in on. But it's not the be-all, end-all. And that's the problem with the F-35 is you're paying all that extra. Like if it was just a case of F-35, if the Swedes had the F-35, okay, and you knew, okay, well, we know the Swedes are never going to make a dive at Canada economically and all that stuff, and you say we're going to annex you, and we know that will never happen with the Swedes, right? But let's say the Swedes were making the F-35, okay? The same rules would still apply. But let's say the Swedes were making the F-35 at the same cost as the Gripen, and the operational cost was the same as the Gripen. Well, it's a no-brainer. You go with the F-35. But could we even afford to run 16 of these things? Again, we're having a hard enough time with legacy F-18s, right? So anyway, you guys tell me what you think. I think this fight is going to go on for a good while. I don't think Carney's going to make a deal on this anytime soon because he's really in a lose-lose position. If you take the Saab Gripens, you could jeopardize all kinds of trade, and this is what the U.S. trade ambassador to Canada is saying, that it could compromise NORAD, it could compromise this, future weapons deals, everything like that. And we don't want to burn our bridges, you know what I mean? Because maybe Donald Trump quits or something like that, or gets replaced by somebody that, a president that actually maybe doesn't love us, but like, okay, now we're going to go back to what we had. We're going to get rid of the tariffs. We're going to negotiate where there's trade issues, like sensible people, and we're going to get rid of all the rhetoric. We're not going to invade you. You got our guarantee, blah, blah, blah. Let's do business again. You know what I mean? But by that time, it won't matter because the ball rolling of a sovereign Canada is already underway under Carney through all these new trade deals. This is why the man's flying all over the planet right now. He's so busy. I haven't seen this kind of business fervor in Canada since Stephen Harper. And I know a lot of people think I give him way too much credit. I don't. I tell you exactly what he did. I know all the bad things he did. The thing is when you say something good about a politician that people don't like, which is most politicians, the people that hate that politician, well, you missed this and you missed that. No, I know about Agenda 21, Agenda 23. Harper was a globalist, right? You know what I mean? Like, he wasn't perfect. But if you judge him by every metric, it's not lionizing the guy or idolizing the guy. It's just telling you that's where the bar was set. That was the best quality of life, the best the military's ever done under Canada since the Cold War, right? It just is what it is. So it's not a reigning endorsement. I don't particularly like any of these men. It's just, and under Stephen Harper, we had the least scandals Canada's ever had politically. We had one $35,000 helicopter ride under Peter MacKay out of 10 years. That was the worst scandal the Harper government produced. And even at that, I'm like, 35,000? The average liberal scandal is going to be $3 billion. And they, like Jean Chrétien, billions of dollars in scandals. And the guy's still walking free. It's unbelievable. Adrienne Clarkson, millions and millions of dollars. She's still on the taxpayer's dollar, even though she's no longer Governor General for like 2 decades now. It's unbelievable, right? So I think it's important that, we take all these other things into consideration. I know I'm going in circles now, whatever, but and I know there's going to be more to say once the deal is made. But you have to understand, Canada's in a bad position right now. Trump is in a position where he wants to destroy our economy. So once we collapse, the idea is that every Canadian go, oh, 51st state, take us. That's the idea, right? So Carney is smart enough to know, and most politicians are smart enough to know that you can't make a deal with Trump because there is no deal to be made. But the thing is that when you look at it from just the political noise out there, it's the right wingers like, well, Carney can't make a deal. Everybody else is getting a deal with the United States. Why can't we make a deal? Because there's no deal to be made. It's no matter what deal, Carney and Trudeau, and I hate Trudeau. You guys know I hate the man. Both did things to appease Trump, especially Carney right in the beginning. He started trying to, okay, well, don't wreck our economy. Calm down. I'll do what you want. To the most part, okay, maybe not perfectly, but they stepped in the right direction the way Trump told them to. And then Trump moves the goalpost. Oh, that's not good enough. Sure, you lock down your border a little bit better, but there's 2 illegals got through, that's it, deal's off, right? And that's what you're dealing with Trump. You can't make a deal with him because there's no deal to be made. Donald Trump's goal with Canada is to destroy our economy. The problem is, and most people don't understand this, and I mentioned it, and once you really look at it and start getting into the meat and potatoes of things and analyzing things, you'll realize, yes, Canada is everybody could say, yes, Canada is in a completely disastrous position of being, having half of its economy stuck to the United States, right? Intertwined with the United States. But it's what saves us grace is the fact that we're intertwined, meaning we're like Siamese twins. You can't kill one industry in Canada without knocking out an industry or two in the United States. It's almost mutually assured destruction because of all the cross-border trade. Use the auto sector, for example. One vehicle might have parts crossing the border, stuff made in Detroit, stuff made in Ontario. It might cross the border 16 times, pick a number, right? And every time it crosses, there's a tariff on that. So what is a vehicle really going to cost by this time next year? God knows, right? So Donald Trump found out that he can't just flick a switch and shut off our economy the same way, but he wants to, but he can't do it because it will have devastating effects. Now, most of the Americans, the way they understand it, the ones that are like real supporters of Trump, the ones that are left, he lost Marjorie Taylor Greene the other day, one of the biggest advocates for him, and she's now out. She's like, I'm not dealing with this guy's full of shit. You know what I mean? And so when she jumps off the Trump train, that's like, you can't get a harder MAGA supporter than that, right? So I know people, when I say that, it's like, oh, it's because you're a liberal. It's like, no, I'm conservative. I didn't vote for the liberals up here, but we got them, But I got to tell you what they're doing, right? Good, bad, and ugly, and that's what it is. But the thing is that the weapons industry has linkages too. So, like NORAD, you can't just cut off Canada out of NORAD and then still have a functioning northern defense system because Canada and NORAD are intertwined. I'm pro-NORAD. I'm anti-NATO, but I'm pro-NORAD because that defends Canada and the United States, and it's in our mutually best interest to do so. Right? But Donald Trump doesn't want that anymore. Canada's a security risk. If we buy Saab Gripen jets, which is now, Sweden is now a NATO country, somehow that's a betrayal of the United States, and, we can't be trusted, right? So they're going to use it to their advantage. Is that the case? Not really so, but it's the way it's going to be spun, right? That Canada can't be trusted with our technology. So the only options Trump has right now is kill the F-35 deal, the P-8 Poseidon deal, and maybe some other procurement deals. Just kill it all, right? And cut off our parts, right? But we can play the same, okay, fine, if we can't get our parts for our F-18s, our remaining F-18s and some other of our equipment that we buy from you, well, maybe we'll hold back the F-35 parts, which the F-35 struggles enough to maintain serviceability, right? So everything is a negotiation. Everything is going to be messy. Yes, your guy could do no wrong. Their guy could do no right. It goes both ways. It doesn't matter if you're talking Trump or Carney. The people that love Carney love Carney. The people that love Trump. The political spin will be in. The people that hate both of them, like myself, I'll just try to give you the best information I can. Right now, Carney's not in a great position, but he's doing something about it in the sense of trying to find other trade deals. The over-the-horizon radar systems, we weren't going to get those from the United States, and that will protect, like for Arctic sovereignty, like that basically gives us radars that can see into Russia. So the Americans were never going to give us that deal. That's if it works as good as advertised. The problem is they're stationary radar systems, so they're going to get taken out by the Russians if they come across or the Chinese if they come across the North Pole, right? Our icebreakers deal with the Nordic alliance that we're making right now. Like Canada's really turning to the Nordic countries, which makes a ton of sense because we're all in the same, we're all up in the Arctic Circle, right? So not all of us, but like we're joined onto the Arctic Circle. So it makes sense for Canada, Greenland, Iceland, if they jump in on it, the Netherlands, Kingdom of Denmark, basically Finland, Norway, Sweden, to maybe Latvia or whatever. It makes sense for those countries, those high Baltic countries, to say, hey, Canada, let's get our supply chains interlinked, because basically we'll be the ones isolating the Russians, right? Because you got to think of the top of the world, right? And then of course with all the icebreakers and Arctic patrol ships that Canada has built, we built 6 new ones. Possibly going to build 6 more for the Coast Guard. So the Americans don't have the icebreaker capability Canada has, and we're now working with Finland and all that because our shipyards are completely full. So it's only a matter of time before we get the submarines. Maybe we get some from France. It'd be nice to get some of those Barracuda subs from France. That'd be great. But there's a lot that can be done in stopgap. Yes, you're buying older equipment, but you're building numbers. And if you're not going to do that, then okay, fine. Let's not buy a single old piece of equipment at all. But that's what we were doing from the States, and it was buying their hand-me-downs most of the time. So yes, we got in on the F-18 when it was new, but we haven't bought any fighters since from them. And before that, we were always buying their hand-me-down fighters. For example, when the F-4 Phantom came out, they sold us the Voodoos, right? They sold us last year's T-shirt. That's what they did. So that's not a great deal for Canada at all. What the F-35 is the current most advanced thing from the Americans. But when are we going to get it? We're probably not going to get it until it's obsolete. But Sweden is relevant now with their Saab Gripen. It's relevant now. It might not be the top dog, but it's one that makes the most sense, and it's relevant now, and we can sort of get them now. The other option is the Rafales, and the Super Hornet's no longer a viable situation for even the States. So it's Eurofighter, Rafales, and because the Rafale is in production, the Saab Gripen is in production, Eurofighter is still in production, and so is the F-35. So those are your options for new airplanes. And then, of course, there's Russian airplanes that we can't get a hold of. But the Su-35 would be a phenomenal airplane for Canada. It's just, could we afford to run it? Backed up with Su-30s or Su-34s, right? But they're the people that we're going to be fighting, so we're probably not going to get those airplanes. But should we be able to steal one from the Ukraine, maybe we would do some reverse engineering. So we'll see where we go. It's not going to be good no matter which way we go. The politics is going to be the bigger driver of the decision than anything. My hunch is we are probably going to take the Saab Gripen deal just out of Canada's survival, but will we be able to follow through with the deal, with the political fallout that will come with that? So if Carney's going to do that, he has to make the deal when everything's ready to go. So he's going to have to sort of do a wink, wink, nudge, nudge behind closed doors, which is, cheating. But, it's politics, right? Trump is doing the same thing. Because that's what every world leader is trying to do right now, is do deals behind Trump's back so that they don't get caught up in his rhetoric and volatility, right? So it's because nobody can trust a trade deal with the United States right now. And that's working to Carney's advantage. So does Carney really want the relationship to get better between the United States or whatever? Probably not, because it gives them the advantage. This is probably why Doug Ford is he's reaping the advantage of the trade war for his own industries. It's dirty, yeah, I agree with it. It's bad for us low people, the John Q. public, but it does work in the empire interest, so to speak, long term. So we'll see who comes out on top, or are we all going to lose? Most likely, Trump cancels the deal, it'll be turmoil for him as well. So it's kind of one of those catch-22s, right? That's one of the advantages of the disaster that of globalism has brought us, of, making things, like parts coming from around the world to make one object, rather than the old school way of just build it in your country. Even if you have to build it slightly more expensive, you get the reliability of not having your industries linked to geopolitics and trade deals and stuff like that. Like imports and exports should just be icing on the cake. It shouldn't be the driver of your economy. Problem is when your economy is predominantly driven by big corporations like the United States, you kind of have to rely more on globals. But if you have an economy more driven by small business like Canada, you might be able to divert to more smaller businesses, which is stability from within the country. But you have to have the resources to be able to do that. Canada does. We haven't developed our resources to the level to be able to do that, to build the industries to be 100% self-reliable. Saab can help us with that. But anyway, there we go. So could the United States, but they don't want competition. So there you go. Anyway, yeah, so I can go on forever on it. You guys tell me what you think. There you go.